Hello, this is Joe. Welcome back to the channel. At a recent type-in here in Albuquerque at the Juan Tabo Library, we had a couple bring in this Smith-Corona SCM Electra 220 electric typewriter and donate it to us. So here's a good opportunity to look at the Electra series of Smith-Corona electric typewriters, and we're going to consider 14 fun facts about the Smith-Corona electric typewriters. Stay tuned. So fact number one is that the Electra series of Smith-Corona typewriters, there are 4 models in this series. There's the 110, the 120, the 210, and the 220. And how they differ is the 100 series are manual carriage return machines, whereas the 200 series are automatic carriage return machines. So therefore, this 220 is a automatic carriage return machine. It has no carriage return arm. And then the center digit, the middle digit of the model number, if it's a 1, it indicates it's a 10-inch platen. If it's a 2, it indicates it's a 12-inch platen. Fun fact number 2 is that Smith-Corona made a whole bunch of these electric typewriters in this general configuration besides the Electra series, and they're not all that well documented on the serial number database, primarily because Smith-Corona probably destroyed their internal records years ago, and those aren't available for us to research. But in my own collection, I have a Coronet Automatic 12. It looks very similar to the 220 Electra, but the difference is the Coronet has no power space right here. So if you have the power turned on, you can power space. It has no changeable type. Well, according to the owner's manual, the Coronet has no changeable type. But my Coronet does have changeable type. So at the point at which the operating manual for this typewriter was published in 1969, the Coronets did not have changeable type, but later on they did. The other difference is the Coronet does not have a jeweled main bearing. This was a feature that Smith-Corona advertised, and there's a little jewel symbol down here below the type guide. And I think it refers to a jeweled bearing for the escapement. The Coronet does not have a half-space key like the Electra has, and the Coronet does not have the power-on neon indicator lamp like the Electra series has. So Smith-Corona also made these electric typewriters for other brands, and in my collection, which you've seen before, is my Singer branded electric typewriter. And it's kind of equivalent to a 110 in the sense of it is a narrower carriage with a manual carriage return. But it has less features than a Electra 110 because it's not an Electra per se. So the lady who brought this to the library and donated it to us is named Nell Kroger. And she told us that, quote, "This typewriter was a gift from my uncle after I received my master's degree in mathematics, and I used it to type up my doctoral thesis messily and then gave it to a professional typist to type it up more neatly." So this typewriter had been used by the one owner, Nell, since she graduated with her master's degree in college, which is a really cool backstory. I really love that. So fun fact number 4, I've already alluded to this, but the serial number database is not quite totally complete when it comes to these later electric typewriters, mainly because Smith-Corona didn't provide a lot of their internal records. But this serial number begins with 6ELE. And written on the inside of the owner's manual near the back is the purchase date is August 6th, 1969. So that little bit of data, a handwritten date in the owner's manual, becomes another important data point. I'm going to register this typewriter on the typewriter database. Thank you, Ted Monk, for maintaining that database. And it's up to all of us in the typewriter community to provide data into the database with our typewriters. So I'm going to be sure to register this typewriter in there. And if you have a Smith-Corona electric typewriter, and if you have an idea of the purchase date or when it was manufactured, be sure to register your machine on the database. We need more of these Electric 6 Series machines to fill in the gaps in our knowledge about them. So at this date in Smith Corona's manufacturing, they still only had whole line spacing, 1, 2, or 3 line spacing, which is kind of a disappointment in a lot of ways because a lot of the European and Japanese typewriters were already, for years, had been doing half line spacing. However, it does have half space feature. So it is a separate key next to the space bar for you can move the carriage in half space increments. And as the owner's manual indicates, this is a handy way to insert a missing letter in an already typed line. This feature was available in a lot of European and Japanese typewriters for years before because those typewriters were half space machines, where Smith Corona kind of figured out how to make a half space feature in what was originally a whole space incrementing escapement system. So fun fact number 6 is with the power off, the backspace, half space, margin release, and tabs can be operated without assistance from the motor. But shifting the space bar, the power space feature, and the powered return all need power from the motor. So fun fact number 7 is all these Smith Corona Electrics feature the removable platen. I believe all the 6 series, even the manual ones like the Galaxies, have a removable platen. And to quickly show you, so to take out the platen, you first want to move the left margin setting all the way to the left and then pull the carriage all the way to the right. Then you want to lift the paper bail and the eraser table and lift up this panel that says RP, which is remove platen. And then there'll be a lever right here. You want to pull the lever up and then you can lift up the right platen knob, pull the platen out toward the right-hand side. There's the platen. Now, in order to reinstall the platen, you want to engage the left edge of the platen back into the clutch assembly. You may have to rotate the end of the platen slightly to get it to line up. And then this grooved collar, you want to push it down here and seat the right side of the platen all the way down. Lower the erasing table, paper bail, the right side. Reset your margin and you're good to go. So fun fact number 8 is underneath the front panel, basically below the space bar, is a thumb wheel with an indicator, and you can use that to adjust the touch of the machine. It goes from 1 to 4, and this knurled knob is a multi-turn knob. And I find the usefulness of it is if you have the touch set to the lightest setting, the keys are going to be so sensitive that if you just make an errant hand movement of a few millimeters, you could trigger an errant letter to be printed. So on these electric typewriters, because they're already so easy to type on, the keys require very little key travel, like maybe 5 millimeters, and hardly any strength or force is required. I like to increase the touch setting with a little bit more tension to prevent me from mistakenly typing errant characters, and it makes me a little bit more accurate on these machines. Fun fact number 9 is even though these machines have whole line spacing, you can still do super and subscripts using the line space retainer lever. So fun fact number 10, the 220 and the 120 and the Coronet Automatic 12 are powered carriage return models, and it is a handy feature to have if you're really doing a lot of typing, fast typing, and you want to just get the work done. But that feature can also be a little bit irritating and a little bit violent in the movement of the carriage, and maybe you're typing later at night in the evening and the house is a little bit quieter, and the sound of your electric typing is going to be somewhat noticeable anyways, but when you add to it the sound of the carriage being violently pulled back to the left margin, might be a little bit too much. So I've discovered that there's a secondary way to do a carriage return, and that is to simply turn the Platen knob and push the carriage back to the right. And it operates just as quickly as if you had a manual carriage return lever. So you'll find that the electric Smith Coronet typewriters that only have a manual carriage return, you don't have the option of having a powered carriage return. But on the powered carriage return models, you have the option of doing either one. You can either press the power return button and do a powered carriage return, or you can click push and do it manually. You have the option, and that's the nice thing about these machines. So fun fact number 11 is a lot of these Smith Coronas have been sitting around for years without being turned on, and the two drive belts on the left side here will get a permanent set or a bend in the belt, especially the primary belt that wraps around the narrow clutch pulley on the motor. And I verified this by talking to John Lewis here in Albuquerque, who told me that these machines were designed to be turned on in the morning and left on all day. So you can hear maybe there's a slight little tick, 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 tick noise. That's probably a little kink in the V-belts, the original belts, which this does have the original V-belts. But according to Mr. Lewis, after an hour or two, the motor warms up, and the motor will heat up the V-belts, and it will soften them. And so it'll actually help remove a kink or a bend in your belts just by leaving it on for a few hours. Again, these machines were designed to be used all day. The secretary, the office person would come in, turn it on, leave it on all day, and that's the way they were used, and that's the way they were designed to be used. They have a cooling fan on the motor itself. That's how they work. So those original V-belts for these machines are almost impossible to get replacements for, but a lot of us in the typewriter community have been using round O-rings. So these are O-rings that are 1/8 inch diameter, synthetic rubber. They're found in the plumbing section of the hardware stores, and they work pretty well as replacements for the V-belts. So fun fact number 12 is there is an online service manual for the 12-inch carriage with manual carriage return available on Richard Polt's Classic Typewriter page, and I'll leave a link down below in the description. There's a lot of good servicing information in that manual, including lubrication points and adjustments. A really great manual to have access to. Thank you, Richard, for having that website with all those great resources on it. So according to that service manual, this is fun fact number 13. So you have this thing that Smith Coronet calls a power roll. It is a metal shaft with ridges running around it. And that is the shaft that's turned by the belts. It rotates. It's located underneath the keyboard. And the key linkages are what interfere with that shaft. And that shaft propels the type bars against the Platen. So that power roll normally operates at a speed of from about 480 RPM to 510 RPM based on position number 1 of the copy set control. And if you run the copy set all the way up to the 10 position, then the power roll will turn about 100 RPM faster. And the way that copy set or impression density feature is being controlled by is the intermediate pulley, the one between the primary and the secondary belts, essentially has a variable width pulley. And it is a tapered gap, and there's a V-belt, is the original belts. And so as you open or close the two halves of the pulley, you're effectively making the pulley different diameters, which changes the gear ratio of the drive belt, and that changes the speed of the power roll. However, according to the manual on Richard Polt's website, there were 3 other clutch pulleys, the clutch pulley being the pulley on the shaft of the motor. There were 3 other clutch pulleys that they had available where you could increase the speed of the power roller by 15, 30, or 45 RPM additionally. And that's a really cool fact I didn't know about. So fun fact number 14. Well, on other electric typewriters that have automatic carriage return. In my collection, those would be the Nakajima-made Olympia Reporter and the Olivetti Praxis 48. Both of those machines, on the right side of the power roller is a clutch that has a draw cord wrapped around it, and when you activate the powered carriage return, it engages the clutch, and that draw cord goes back underneath the right side of the carriage, inside the carriage to the left side of the carriage, and it's basically that pulley is turning this way and pulling the carriage back to the right via a secondary draw cord. And I've always thought that those kinds of draw cord based powered carriage return systems seemed a little bit crude, overly complicated, and prone to problems. And that is proven to be true in the case of my Praxis 48, which you might remember from previous video. I have a problem in that machine I have not been able to fix. But the Smith Corona 6 Series electrics, they have a totally different method of driving the carriage on the powered carriage return. Okay, this is the fan blade on the back of the motor shaft. This is the clutch that will engage that gear when the powered carriage return is triggered, and that gear in turn operates this gear, which operates this shaft, on the end of which is a pinion gear that engages the rack gear. So when I push the powered carriage return, that first cylindrical gear slides to the left, engages the clutch, which the motor then starts turning this gear and that shaft. And that shaft in turn turns the pinion gear at the end of the shaft. And this is that pinion gear at the end of the shaft that drives the carriage back via the secondary rack gear. When it reaches the left margin position, the clutch is disconnected and the power return cycle is complete. So I think it's really cool that Smith Corona figured out how to do the powered carriage return without using the secondary drawstring method. I think it's a lot more elegant of a system, and I think the Coronet Automatic 12 is the SCM Electric I've had the longest in my collection, but that powered carriage return continues to be very reliable. I've never seen one of them break, which is kind of remarkable. So I think Smith Corona did a really good job on the powered carriage return design. Well, these were 14 fun facts about the Smith Corona 6 Series Electra electric typewriters. I really like these machines. They sold a lot of them. They're fairly common to find here in the United States. And I think every typewriter collector should have at least one of these in their collection because you really can throw down a lot of words on paper. And these machines really were, in their heyday, they were the much cheaper alternative for small businesses who didn't want to cash out $1,000, $1,500 maybe for a Selectric for their office. These were only a few $100s, and these were the kind of the inexpensive workhorse alternatives to the Selectric back in their day. Great machines to have, and of course, as always, if there's any questions or comments or you have an experience with these electric Smith Coronas, I'd love to hear your comments, your stories down below in the comments. So please drop a comment, and I'd love to talk to you about it. And as always, stay creative and have yourselves a great day.